Aliens sentenced the widow to a human as punishment, but she became his greatest treasure? The persistent meowing of his striped gray kitten pulled Dylan from the depths of sleep. He groaned, rubbing his eyes with the heel of his palm as consciousness reluctantly returned. The small creature, aptly named Trouble, paced anxiously at the foot of his bed, tail twitching with urgency. "What's wrong, buddy?" Dylan's voice came out as a sleep-roughened rasp. "Another nightmare about the vacuum cleaner?" Trouble responded with a series of demanding meows, darting to the bedroom door and back again. The kitten was the only companion Dylan had on this godforsaken rock, an unremarkable human colony at the galaxy's edge that most star charts didn't even bother to name. The place was little more than a forgotten footnote in humanity's expansion, a dumping ground for those who'd fallen through the cracks of interstellar society. Dylan swung his legs over the side of the bed, not bothering with clothes. Who was there to see him anyway? The colony had exactly 8 human residents spread across nearly 100 square miles. Privacy wasn't exactly a concern. All right, I'm coming," he muttered, following the kitten through the stark concrete interior of his prefabricated home. The place was utilitarian at best, a military surplus shelter with all the charm of a storage container. But it was his, and after 5 years of exile, he'd almost grown fond of its brutal simplicity. Trouble skidded to a halt at the front door, pawing frantically at the metal surface. "What the hell has gotten into you?" Dylan reached for the control panel, his muscular frame casting long shadows in the dim morning light filtering through the narrow windows. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Trouble darted outside and Dylan moved to follow, then froze, suddenly aware of 3 critical facts. 1. He was completely naked. 2. Someone was standing on his doorstep. 3. That someone was the most striking woman he'd ever seen. She wasn't human. That much was immediately clear. Her skin was a vibrant azure blue that seemed to shimmer in the morning light, smooth and flawless as polished stone. Deep ocean-colored eyes regarded him with a mixture of shock and disdain, glowing slightly from within. Her features were delicate yet alien, with high cheekbones and slightly pointed ears that peeked through cascading waves of darker blue hair. Her slender body was wrapped in what appeared to be a formal black suit, the fabric possessing an unusual shimmering quality that accentuated every curve. The intricate patterns woven into the material seemed to shift subtly, as if alive. For several excruciating seconds, neither spoke. The alien woman's gaze swept over his naked form, broad shoulders, defined muscles, tousled auburn hair, with an expression that moved from surprise to something unreadable. Dylan finally broke the silence, scooping up Trouble, who had returned to wind between his legs. "I, wasn't expecting company." The alien woman arched a delicate eyebrow. In her right hand, she clutched a sleek metallic case that gleamed in the morning light. "Clearly." Her voice was melodic yet cold, each syllable precisely formed. "Are you Dylan Baldwin?" "That's me," he confirmed, fighting the urge to cover himself. Something told him that showing embarrassment would only make this more awkward. "And you are?" "I am Nylyra Taverin," she announced with the practiced formality of someone accustomed to being recognized. When no reaction came, she added, "Of the celestial houses of Azurus." Dylan shifted Trouble to one arm, using his free hand to scratch the back of his neck. "Sorry, doesn't ring a bell. What brings a celestial house person to my doorstep?" Her posture stiffened, if that were even possible. "I am your punishment." Dylan blinked. "My... what now?" "Not your punishment," she corrected with obvious irritation. "You are mine. This is..." She gestured at the barren landscape surrounding his home. "In exile is my sentence." "I think you'd better come inside," Dylan said after a moment. "I'll put some pants on, and you can explain what the hell you're talking about." Nylyra's nose wrinkled slightly, but she nodded. "That would be preferable." 10 minutes later, now dressed in worn cargo pants and a faded t-shirt, Dylan placed a steaming mug of synthesized coffee in front of his unexpected guest. She sat rigidly at his kitchen table, her metallic case placed carefully beside her chair. "So," he began, taking the seat opposite her, You want to tell me why the universe decided to drop a blue alien princess on my doorstep at dawn? I am not a princess, she corrected sharply. I was the consort of High Counselor Varric Tavarin of the Azurian hegemony. Was? He is dead. Her voice remained perfectly level. And I have been accused of complicity in his demise. Dylan whistled low. Did you do it? The bluntness of his question seemed to catch her off guard. Her luminous eyes widened slightly before narrowing again. My guilt or innocence is irrelevant. The Council of Elders has made its judgment. She took a delicate sip of coffee, then grimaced at the taste. They determined that for one of my station, death would be too merciful, imprisonment too common. So they sent you here? To this backwater? To you specifically? Her gaze was cutting. The council decided that for a woman of my breeding and position, the most fitting punishment would be to bind me to a primitive species, to live out my days as the mate of a human male on a forgotten colony world. Dylan nearly choked on his coffee. Mate? As in question mark. The arrangement is primarily legal and residential, she clarified quickly, though the council would be delighted if I were to suffer the indignity of genuine attachment. Charming bunch, your elders. They are not my anything anymore. For the first time, a flicker of genuine emotion crossed her face, a flash of pain quickly suppressed. I have been stripped of my title, my property, my citizenship. According to Azurian law, I now belong to you. Dylan set down his mug with deliberate care. Nobody belongs to anybody here. I don't know what kind of arrangement your council thinks they've made, but slavery isn't my thing. This is not slavery, she insisted. It is exile with supervision. And if I refuse to supervise you? Nalira's shoulders tensed. Then I will be taken to the void prisons? I would not survive long there. Dylan studied her for a long moment. Despite her cold exterior, there was something vulnerable in the set of her jaw, the careful way she held herself. Trouble, who had been watching from the counter, chose that moment to leap onto the table and approach the alien woman with curious caution. Nalira recoiled slightly. What is this creature doing? That's Trouble. He's just saying hello. Dylan watched as the kitten cautiously sniffed at her hand. He's a good judge of character. To his surprise, Trouble bumped his head against Nalira's fingers, a rumbling purr emanating from his small body. Something in her expression softened, almost imperceptibly. I have nowhere else to go, she admitted quietly, her finger tentatively stroking the kitten's head. Dylan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Well, I guess I've got a spare room. It's not exactly a palace, but it's clean. For the first time, Nalira met his gaze directly. You would allow me to stay? Just like that? Dylan shrugged his broad shoulders. What can I say? I'm a sucker for strays. The first week of cohabitation proved more challenging than Dylan had anticipated. Nalira approached life on the colony with the same disdain she might show toward a particularly resilient insect. Something to be tolerated but never embraced. This is what you call a shower? She stood in the doorway of his bathroom, examining the utilitarian stall with obvious distaste. Where are the sonic cleansers? The aroma modulators? Dylan leaned against the wall, arms crossed over his broad chest. We primitive humans make do with water and soap, been keeping us clean for thousands of years. Barbaric, she muttered, but there was less bite in her tone than the day before. These exchanges became their routine. Nalira would express horror at some aspect of human living, and Dylan would respond with good-natured sarcasm rather than offense. To his surprise, he found her haughtiness more amusing than irritating. On the 8th day, Dylan returned from tending his small hydroponics garden to find Nalira sitting cross-legged on the floor, Trouble purring in her lap as she gently stroked his fur. Traitor, Dylan said to the kitten, who merely blinked lazily in response. Nalira quickly set the cat aside, straightening her posture. Your pet is tolerable. High praise coming from you. Dylan grinned, dropping into the chair across from her. So, are you going to tell me what really happened with your husband? The The question hung in the air between them. Nylyra's luminous eyes narrowed. Why do you care? Because contrary to what your council thinks, humans aren't completely self-absorbed, and because you're living in my house. It is not a complicated story, she finally said, her voice carefully controlled. Varric was old, even by Azurian standards, and our marriage was political. I brought youth and connections to his house. He brought me status. When he died unexpectedly, his rivals saw an opportunity to eliminate me. Did you love him? The question seemed to startle her. Love is not a consideration in Azurian political marriages. That's not what I asked. Nylyra's gaze dropped to her hands. No, I respected him. He was kind, in his way. But there was no love. Dylan nodded, processing this. Well, their loss is my gain, I suppose. Her eyes snapped up to meet his. Excuse me? I was getting pretty tired of talking to Trouble all day. He winked, and to his astonishment, the corner of Nylyra's mouth twitched upward. You are very strange for a human, she observed. And how many humans have you known? You're the first, she admitted. Then maybe I'm perfectly normal and you're the one with skewed expectations. This time her almost smile bloomed into something genuine, transforming her face. Dylan felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest at the sight. The next morning, Dylan woke to the smell of something burning. He bolted from bed, rushing to the kitchen to find Nylyra surrounded by a disaster zone of pots and ingredients. A small fire smoldering in his cooking unit. What the hell are you doing? He asked, quickly extinguishing the flames. Nylyra stood amid the chaos, blue skin flushed a deeper shade with what he recognized as embarrassment. I was attempting to prepare a traditional Azurian morning meal. Dylan surveyed the wreckage of his kitchen. Why? She lifted her chin defiantly. I refuse to be completely dependent upon you. On Azurus, I manage a household staff of 30. Surely I can manage basic sustenance preparation? Instead of mocking her, Dylan felt a surge of admiration. Tell you what, how about I teach you how to cook human style, less likely to burn the house down? That afternoon became the first of many cooking lessons. Nylyra approached the task with the same intensity she seemed to bring to everything, her slender blue fingers mimicking his movements with increasing confidence. When they finally sat down to eat their creation, a simple pasta dish, the pride in her eyes was unmistakable. This is acceptable, she declared after the first bite. Dylan laughed. From you, that's a 5-star review. As days turned to weeks, the rigid boundaries between them began to soften. Dylan noticed how Nylyra's posture relaxed in his presence, and how her formal speech patterns occasionally slipped into something more casual. For his part, he found himself increasingly aware of her. The graceful way she moved, the musical quality of her rare laughter, the subtle floral scent that seemed to emanate from her blue skin. One evening, as they sat on his small porch watching the colony's twin moons rise, Nylyra asked the question he'd been expecting. Why are you here, Dylan? This colony, it is no place for someone like you. He took a long sip of his drink before answering. Same reason as you. Punishment. Her eyes widened slightly. What crime did you commit? Disobeyed orders. I was a rescue pilot for the Terran fleet. During the Proxima conflict, my commanding officer ordered me to abandon a civilian transport under attack. I refused, went back for them. His voice grew distant with the memory. Saved 23 lives. Court-martialed for insubordination. Nylyra studied him with new eyes. You sacrificed your career to save strangers? Wouldn't you? No Azurian would, she said softly. We are taught from birth that the needs of the hegemony outweigh individual lives. Dylan turned to face her fully. And what do you believe? Their eyes locked, and something electric passed between them. Nylyra's gaze dropped to his lips, then back up. I am beginning to question many things I once believed, she whispered. The space between them seemed to shrink, the air charged with unspoken possibility. Dylan found himself leaning closer, drawn by something more powerful than curiosity or attraction, a recognition of something kindred beneath their obvious differences. When their lips finally met, it was Nylyra who closed the final distance. That first kiss changed everything between them. What began as a tentative exploration quickly deepened into something neither had expected, a connection that transcended their different species and backgrounds. In the days that followed, Dylan discovered that beneath Nalira's cool exterior burned a passion that matched his own. "You're full of surprises," he murmured one morning, watching her prepare breakfast with newfound confidence. Her blue skin glowed in the early light streaming through the kitchen window. Nalira's lips curved into a smile that still held traces of her former reserve. "As are you. On Azurus, humans are portrayed as crude, simplistic creatures driven by base instincts." "And what do you think now?" Dylan moved behind her, hands settling on her waist. She turned in his arms, her luminous eyes meeting his. "I think my people understand very little about what truly matters." Their nights together revealed cultural differences that became sources of both amusement and deeper connection. Nalira was fascinated by human concepts of romance and physical intimacy, so different from the clinical, status-driven coupling of Azurian society. "In my culture, physical union is a political transaction," she explained one night as they lay together. "Pleasure is secondary to purpose." Dylan traced the intricate patterns that naturally adorned her blue skin, patterns that seemed to glow faintly when she was aroused. "And now?" Her answer came in the form of a kiss that left no doubt about her feelings. 3 months into their unexpected life together, Dylan's communication terminal chimed with an incoming transmission. Unusual for the isolated colony. Even more unusual was that it was addressed to Nalira. "How would anyone know you're here?" Dylan asked as she hesitantly approached the terminal. "I don't know." Her voice held a note of apprehension. "The council was quite thorough in erasing my existence." The screen flickered to life, revealing the face of another Azurian, male with darker blue skin and the elaborate facial markings of a high-ranking official. His eyes widened at the sight of Nalira. "By the celestial houses, it really is you," he breathed. "I feared the rumors were false." Nalira stiffened. "Counselor Terry's. How unexpected." Dylan moved to stand beside her, a silent show of support that didn't go unnoticed by the Azurian on screen. "I see you've adapted to your circumstances," Terrace remarked, his gaze flicking dismissively over Dylan. "State your purpose, counselor." Nalira's voice had regained some of its former imperial tone. "I doubt this is a social call." Terrace leaned forward. "I have evidence, Nalira. Evidence that proves you were framed for Varek's death. The real culprits were the Marin faction. They wanted his seat on the council and saw you as an obstacle." Dylan felt Nalira stiffen beside him. "You expect me to believe you discovered this out of the goodness of your heart?" "Politics have shifted. The Marins have allied with houses that threaten my position. Exposing them serves my interests." Terrace's candor was refreshing, if cold. "I can help clear your name, restore your status. You could return to Azurus." The words hung in the air between them. Dylan kept his face carefully neutral, though his heart hammered in his chest. Return to Azurus, the very thing that would have been Nalira's deepest wish 3 months ago. "I need time to consider this," Nalira finally said. Terrace nodded. "Of course, but don't take too long. I'm sending a diplomatic vessel to your location. It will arrive in 7 standard days." His eyes shifted to Dylan. "I suggest you use that time to conclude your current arrangements." The transmission ended, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. "Well," Dylan said, forcing lightness into his tone, "that's quite the development." Nalira turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Yes. Do you believe him?" "Terrace is manipulative and self-serving," she said slowly, "but he rarely lies outright. If he says he has evidence, he likely does." Dylan nodded, moving to the kitchen to pour himself a drink. He needed something to do with his hands. "So, 7 days until your ticket home arrives." Nalira followed him, her movements hesitant in a way they hadn't been for weeks. "Dylan, it's okay," he cut her off, not trusting himself to hear whatever she might say. "This is good news. You can clear your name, get your life back." "Is that what you think I want?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to voice. Before Dylan could respond, the perimeter alarm blared. Another unusual occurrence for their quiet existence. The security monitor showed a small spacecraft landing near the colony's central hub. 2 unexpected visitors in one day, Dylan muttered. That's got to be a record for this rock. They made their way to the landing area, joining the handful of other colonists who had emerged to investigate. The craft was sleek and unmistakably Azurian in design, though smaller than a diplomatic vessel. The hatch opened and a slender female figure emerged. Her blue skin was several shades lighter than Nalira's, her clothing simple but elegant. When she spotted Nalira among the onlookers, her face lit up with recognition. "Lady Teverin," she called, rushing forward. Nalira froze. "Alaris, what are you doing here?" The newcomer dropped into a formal bow. "I've been searching for you since your sentencing. When I heard rumors of Counselor Teresa's discovery, I knew I had to reach you first." Dylan looked between the 2 Azurian women. "Friend of yours?" "My former handmaiden," Nalira explained, her voice tight. "Alaris, this is Dylan Baldwin. She hesitated. "Punishment," Alaris supplied, eyeing Dylan with undisguised horror. "Oh, my lady, what they've done to you is unconscionable. Forcing you to live with this human." Dylan raised an eyebrow. "Nice to meet you too." Alaris continued as if he hadn't spoken. "But it's over now. We can return you to your rightful place. Once your name is cleared, you'll never have to think about this dreadful experience again." Nalira's eyes met Dylan's, and in that moment, something passed between them, an understanding that transcended words. She turned back to her former servant. "Alaris, there is much you don't understand. Come inside. We have a great deal to discuss." Alaris paced the living room like a caged predator, her movements sharp with agitation. She had been talking nonstop for nearly an hour, detailing the political chaos that had erupted on Azores following Nalira's exile. Dylan sat quietly on the couch, trouble curled in his lap, watching the 2 Azurian women with careful attention. "The Marin faction has seized 3 council seats since your departure," Alaris explained. "They're systematically dismantling everything your husband built. That's why Terrace reached out. He's desperate." Nalira, who had been uncharacteristically silent, finally spoke. "And you believe his evidence is genuine?" "I've seen it myself," Alaris confirmed. "Financial records, communication logs, all pointing to the Marins. They orchestrated Varek's death and framed you." She paused, glancing disdainfully at Dylan. "This punishment was never about justice. It was about removing you as a political threat." Dylan met her gaze evenly. "Sounds like your people have a funny way of handling disagreements." Alaris bristled. "Our political system has maintained peace for 10,000 years, human. What has yours accomplished besides endless war?" "Enough," Nalira cut in. "Alaris, I appreciate your loyalty in coming here, but I need time to consider my options." "What is there to consider?" Alaris looked genuinely perplexed. "You can clear your name, reclaim your status, your wealth, your dignity." "I said enough." Nalira's tone carried the unmistakable authority of her former position. "You will stay in the colony's visitor quarters tonight. We'll discuss this further tomorrow." After Alaris departed, a heavy silence fell between Dylan and Nalira. He watched her move to the window, her slender form silhouetted against the setting sun. "So," he finally said, "sounds like you've got a get-out-of-exile-free card." Nalira turned to face him. "It appears so. You don't seem thrilled." "I'm conflicted." She moved to sit beside him on the couch, her thigh pressing against his. 3 months ago, I would have given anything for this opportunity." Dylan forced a smile. "And now?" Instead of answering directly, she reached for his hand, her blue fingers intertwining with his. "I accessed the colony's communication array after Terrace's transmission. Did some research of my own." "Find anything interesting?" "Yes." Her luminous eyes held his. "Tyrus isn't just seeking an alliance. According to encrypted communications I managed to access, he's planning to use my return as the catalyst for a coup. The evidence against the Marins is real, but his plan would trigger a civil war." Dylan whistled low. "That's quite the homecoming party." "Indeed." A small smile played at her lips. It seems I've been given a choice between personal vindication at the cost of thousands of lives, or... She trailed off. Or... Nalira leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his in an intimate gesture. Or choosing a different kind of life altogether. Dylan's heart hammered in his chest. With a primitive human on a forgotten rock at the edge of the galaxy? With the man who showed me what it means to be valued for myself, not my status or political usefulness. Her voice dropped to a whisper. With the man I've grown to love? The word hung between them, new and fragile. In all their time together, neither had spoken it aloud. Dylan cupped her face in his hands. Are you sure? Your whole life is back there. Your culture. Your people. My whole life was empty ritual and political maneuvering. Her eyes shimmered with emotion. Here, I found something real. Something worth choosing. Their kiss was different from the others they had shared, deeper, more certain. When they finally parted, Dylan rested his forehead against hers. So what do we tell Alaris? And Terrace when his ship arrives? Nylara's expression hardened with determination. The truth? That I won't be used as a pawn in another political game. She stroked his cheek. But we need to be careful. Terrace won't take rejection well. That night, their lovemaking held a new intensity, an affirmation of the choice they had made together. The patterns on Nalira's skin glowed brighter than Dylan had ever seen, illuminating the darkness of their bedroom like bioluminescent waves. In the aftermath, as they lay tangled together, Dylan traced the glowing patterns with his fingertips. I never asked what these mean, he murmured. Nylara caught his hand, guiding it over a particularly intricate pattern near her heart. This one represents my family lineage. This, she moved his hand to her shoulder, my educational achievements. And this, she guided his fingers to a pattern on her lower abdomen that pulsed with a new, vibrant light, is new. Dylan studied it with fascination. What does it mean? It's the mark of a life bond. Her voice was soft with wonder. They appear when an Azurian forms a permanent emotional connection. They're rare in political marriages. So your body is literally telling you that you've fallen for a primitive human? Dylan grinned. It would seem so. She nestled against him. How embarrassing for me. The next morning, they found Alaris waiting at their door, her expression grim. We have a problem, she announced without preamble. Terrace's ship will arrive tomorrow, not in 7 days. He lied about the timeline. Dylan exchanged a glance with Nalira. Why would he do that? Because, Alaris said, her voice dropping. I don't think he's coming to rescue you, my lady. I've been monitoring communications. He's bringing a military escort. Nalira's face paled to a lighter shade of blue. He means to force my compliance. Or eliminate you entirely if you refuse, Alaris added. The evidence clearing your name is real, but his intentions are far darker than he claimed. Dylan's jaw tightened. Then we need a plan. Fast. Dawn broke over the colony with an ominous red glow that matched Dylan's mood. He watched from the bedroom window as Nalira prepared herself, methodically transforming from the woman he'd come to love back into Lady Deverin of the Celestial Houses. She had retrieved her formal attire from the metallic case she'd arrived with, garments she hadn't touched in months. The shimmering black suit with its intricate patterns molded to her body like a second skin, emphasizing her alien beauty in a way that made Dylan's breath catch despite the circumstances. You look like you did that first day, he observed, leaning against the doorframe. Nalira met his eyes in the mirror. That is the intention. Terrace must believe I've been merely enduring this exile, not... She trailed off, her fingers unconsciously tracing the life bond pattern now hidden beneath her clothing. Not falling in love with the primitive human? Dylan finished with a wry smile. Precisely. She turned to face him fully. Azurians consider themselves masters of political deception, but they have a blind spot. They cannot fathom that anyone would choose a simpler life over power and status. Dylan crossed the room to her, placing his hands on her shoulders. That's our advantage then. Yes. She leaned into his touch. Terrace will expect me to be desperate to leave, to reclaim my position. He won't suspect I might have other priorities now. Their plan was risky but straightforward. Nylira would appear eager to return to Azurus with Teres, playing the role of a woman desperate to clear her name and reclaim her status. Meanwhile, Dylan and Alaris would work to secure the evidence and sabotage Teres' ship, preventing a hasty departure while they exposed his coup plans to the Azurian government. "I still don't like the idea of you being alone with him," Dylan muttered. "I spent decades navigating Azurian politics," Nylira reminded him, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I can handle Tyrus for a few hours." "It's not your abilities, I doubt. It's his intentions." Nylira's expression softened. "Your protective instinct is both frustrating and endearing. Another human trait I've grown fond of." "Yeah, well, we humans are funny that way. We get attached." He pulled her closer, breathing in her scent one last time before they had to assume their roles. "Just be careful." "Always." She pressed her lips to his in a kiss that carried the weight of everything they couldn't say aloud. When they parted, her eyes glowed with an intensity that made the patterns on her skin pulse faintly beneath her clothing. "Tonight, when this is over, we'll have our future back." The colony's alert system blared just after midday, announcing the approach of an unscheduled vessel. Dylan watched from the shadows of the communications hub as Teres' ship descended. Sleek, predatory, and far more heavily armed than a diplomatic vessel had any right to be. "Military-grade shields and weapon systems," he muttered to Alaris, who stood beside him monitoring the colony's sensor readings. "Your counselor isn't taking any chances." "He's not my counselor," she corrected sharply. "My loyalty is to Lady Tavarin alone." Dylan glanced at her, reassessing. "Why? What makes her different from the others?" Alaris' expression softened slightly. "She treated her servants as people, not possessions. When my brother fell ill, she used her influence to secure treatment reserved for nobility." She paused. "She has a good heart beneath all that Azurian propriety." "On that, we agree." Dylan turned his attention back to the landing ship. "Let's make sure she doesn't have to play this role any longer than necessary." The ship's ramp descended with theatrical slowness, disgorging a contingent of Azurian guards in ceremonial armor that didn't quite conceal the lethal weapons at their sides. Counselor Tyres followed, his dark blue skin adorned with elaborate markings of rank and status that seemed to shift and glow in the colony's harsh sunlight. Nylira stood waiting at the designated landing area, her posture perfect, her expression a careful mask of dignified suffering. From his hiding place, Dylan barely recognized her. She had reclaimed the imperial bearing of Lady Tavarin completely. "Lady Tavarin," Teres called, approaching with arms outstretched in a gesture of welcome that didn't reach his calculating eyes. "How you must have suffered in this primitive environment." "Counselor," Nylira acknowledged with a precise inclination of her head. "Your arrival is most timely. I have endured quite enough of this punishment." Teres' smile was predatory. "I can imagine. To think the council believed forcing you to cohabitate with a human would humble you. It has been enlightening, if not in the way they intended." Nylira's tone was perfectly calibrated, disdainful, yet ambiguous. "And where is this human now? I expected him to be hovering protectively. Attending to colony business. He has no authority to prevent my departure." Teres nodded, satisfied. "Excellent. I've brought the evidence as promised. Once we return to Azurus, we can present it to the full council and restore your rightful position." "I look forward to it." Nylira glanced at the ship. "Shall we depart immediately?" "Soon." Teres' eyes narrowed slightly. "First, I'd like to discuss our strategy in private. The political landscape has shifted considerably in your absence." As they boarded the ship together, Dylan slipped from his hiding place and made his way toward the vessel's exterior access panel, exactly where Alaris had indicated it would be. Years of military training made his movements silent and efficient as he attached the small device she had provided. "Transmitter in place," he whispered into his communicator. "You're up, Alaris." Inside the ship, Nylira maintained her performance flawlessly as Teres led her to his private quarters. The room was opulent by spaceship standards, clearly designed to impress. "Wine?" Teres offered, gesturing to a decanter of glowing blue liquid. "Thank you." Nalira accepted the glass, careful not to actually drink. Now tell me about this evidence. Terrace activated a holographic display showing financial transactions and communications that clearly implicated the Marin faction in Varric's death. As you can see, they planned it meticulously. Your exile was merely a convenient way to remove you as a political obstacle. And what do you gain from exposing this? Nylira asked, maintaining her role while carefully watching his reactions. Alliance with your faction, of course. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Together, we can reshape the council. With your status restored and my resources, we could control half the seats. And the other half? Terrace's expression darkened. Those who cannot be persuaded can be replaced. I see. Nalira took a calculated risk. A coup, then? A necessary restructuring, he corrected smoothly. The hegemony has grown weak, indecisive. Strong leadership is required. Outside, Dylan had finished his work on the ship's engines. The sabotage was subtle. Nothing that would endanger lives, but enough to prevent a quick departure. Now he waited for Alaris's signal, his heart pounding with each passing minute that Nalira remained alone with Terrace. Come on, he muttered, checking his communicator again. What's taking so long? As if in answer, the device lit up with Alaris's message. Evidence secured. Transmission ready. Awaiting your command. Dylan took a deep breath and pressed the transmit button. It was time to end this charade. The moment the transmission began, alarms blared throughout Terrace's ship. The counselor's face contorted from smooth confidence to rage in an instant as he realized what was happening. What have you done? He snarled, lunging toward the control panel. Nalira stepped smoothly between him and the controls. Ensuring justice, counselor. Your confession is being broadcast to the Azurian High Council as we speak. Terrace's eyes narrowed to slits. You ungrateful wretch, I offered you redemption. You offered me complicity in mass murder, Nalira corrected, her voice steady despite the danger. I found something better. Understanding dawned on Terrace's face. The human, he spat. You've actually developed feelings for that primitive creature. His name is Dylan, Nalira replied, a hint of pride entering her voice, and he has shown me more honor and integrity than I've witnessed in a century of Azurian politics. Terrace's hand moved with startling speed, grabbing Nalira's arm and twisting it behind her back. With his other hand, he pressed a small blade against her throat. Guards, he shouted. Secure the ship. Find the human. Outside, Dylan heard the commotion and saw armed Azurians pouring from the vessel. He ducked behind a storage container, his military training kicking in as he assessed the situation. 6 guards, all armed, and Nalira still inside with Terrace. His communicator vibrated. Dylan, came Alaris's urgent whisper. The transmission is complete, but Terrace has taken Lady Taverin hostage. I need a distraction, Dylan replied, and access to the ship. The colonists are already moving into position, Alaris informed him, and I can override the rear hatch security. But you'll have only moments before the system resets? Dylan nodded grimly. That's all I need. Across the landing area, the colony's small population of exiles, former soldiers, engineers, and various other misfits who'd found themselves on this forgotten rock, began emerging from buildings with improvised weapons and determination written across their faces. Cole Fletcher, a former Alliance engineer who'd been exiled for selling military secrets, fired up an industrial sonic disruptor that sent the Azurian guards clutching at their sensitive ears. In the confusion, Dylan sprinted toward the rear of the ship where Alaris had promised an entry point. Inside, Terrace dragged Nalira toward the bridge, the blade still at her throat. This changes nothing, he hissed. Once we're off this miserable rock, I'll simply deny everything. It will be my word against yours, a respected counselor versus an accused murderer. You're forgetting something, Nalira replied calmly, despite the blade pressing against her blue skin. The evidence clearing my name is genuine. You admitted as much yourself. Evidence can be destroyed, Terrace countered, and so can you if necessary. A noise from the corridor made Terrace whirl around, dragging Nalira with him. The blade pressed deeper, drawing a thin line of iridescent blue blood. Show yourself, Terrace demanded. Dylan stepped into view, his hands raised in apparent surrender. "Let her go, Terrace. It's over." "Over?" The counselor laughed bitterly. "I have your precious mate at my mercy, human. I'm dictating terms now." "Are you?" Dylan's voice remained steady. "Because from where I'm standing, you're trapped on a disabled ship surrounded by angry colonists, with the Azurian Council watching your every move via live transmission." Terrace's eyes darted to the still active communication panel. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Dylan took a careful step forward. "The thing about us humans, counselor, is that we're remarkably resourceful when protecting what we care about." Nalira's eyes met Dylan's, and in that moment, a silent communication passed between them. Trust, determination, and something deeper that transcended their different species. With a swift movement that caught Terrace off guard, Nalira drove her elbow into his ribs while twisting away from the blade. The counselor staggered back, momentarily winded, giving Dylan the opening he needed. He launched himself forward, tackling Terrace to the ground with the full force of his muscular frame. The blade clattered across the floor as the two grappled. Despite his political position, Terrace was surprisingly strong, his Azurian physiology giving him advantages Dylan hadn't anticipated. A well-placed blow sent Dylan reeling back, his vision momentarily blurred. Terrace scrambled for the fallen blade, but Nalira was faster. She snatched it up and stood over the counselor, her expression cold and regal, every inch the Lady Tavarin. "Yield," she commanded, Terrace's face contorted with hatred. "Never to a traitor who would choose a human over her own kind." "Then you understand nothing about what truly matters," Nalira replied. "Dylan taught me that honor isn't about status or power. It's about doing what's right, even when it costs you everything." The ship's communication system crackled to life, and a stern Azurian voice filled the bridge. "Counselor Terrace, this is High Elder Morath. Your vessel is surrounded by Azurian enforcement ships. Surrender immediately." Disbelief washed over Terrace's face. "Impossible! You couldn't have—" "The High Council moves quickly when presented with evidence of treason," Dylan explained, rising to his feet, "especially when that evidence includes detailed plans for a coup." Outside, the distinctive hum of Azurian military vessels filled the air as three sleek ships descended around the colony. Terrace slumped in defeat, the fight draining from him as reality set in. Enforcement officers flooded the ship, securing Terrace and his guards. As they led the disgraced counselor away, he shot one final venomous glare at Nalira. "You could have had everything," he spat. Nalira slipped her hand into Dylan's, the patterns on her skin glowing visibly even through her formal attire. "I already do." In the aftermath, as medical personnel tended to the minor injuries sustained during the confrontation, a distinguished Azurian official approached Dylan and Nalira. His elaborate robes and facial markings identified him as High Elder Morath himself. "Lady Tavarin," he acknowledged with a formal bow, "the Council extends its deepest apologies for the injustice you have suffered." Nalira inclined her head gracefully. "I accept your apology, Elder. The evidence provided by your associates has been verified," Morath continued, his gaze flickering curiously to Dylan. "Your name has been cleared and your status and properties restored." "Thank you," Nalira replied. "We would be honored if you would return to Azurus," Morath added. "Your insight would be valuable as we restructure following Terrace's betrayal." Dylan felt his heart sink. Despite everything they'd been through, despite the life bond they shared, the pull of her former life might be too strong to resist. He forced himself to remain silent, knowing this had to be her choice alone. Nalira's fingers tightened around his. "I am honored by the offer, Elder Morath. However, I believe I may be of greater service in a different capacity." Morath raised an eyebrow. "Oh, recent events have highlighted the need for better understanding between our peoples," Nalira explained. "Perhaps it is time for the Azurian hegemony to establish formal diplomatic relations with human colonies." A slow smile spread across Morath's face. "Are you proposing yourself as an ambassador, Lady Tavarin?" "I believe I have unique qualifications for such a position," she replied, the faintest hint of humor in her voice as she glanced at Dylan. "Indeed you do," Morath agreed, his eyes twinkling with unexpected understanding. "The Council will consider your proposal." In the meantime, you are free to remain here, or go wherever you wish." As Morith departed to oversee Terrace's transfer to an enforcement vessel, Dylan turned to Nylira. "Ambassador, huh?" he said with a grin. "That's quite the career change from political exile." "I've discovered I have a talent for cross-cultural relations," she replied, her luminous eyes dancing with mischief. "Though I may require extensive ongoing research with my human subject." Dylan pulled her close, uncaring of the Azurian official still milling about. "I'm all for thorough research." 1 year after Terrace's failed coup, the newly established Azurian embassy on New Terra Colony had become the most talked about diplomatic outpost in the sector. Its unique ambassador, a former political exile who had married her human punishment, drew both curiosity and controversy from across the galaxy. Dylan leaned against the doorframe of their private quarters, watching Nylira prepare for the day's diplomatic meetings. Their living space blended human practicality with Azurian elegance, much like their relationship. "The Regelian ambassador is still insisting that our union violates some obscure interspecies protocol," Nylira remarked, adjusting her formal attire. The shimmering fabric now incorporated Earth-inspired designs alongside traditional Azurian patterns. "Let him insist," Dylan replied with a grin. "We've broken bigger taboos than that." Nylira's lips curved into a smile that still held traces of her former imperial bearing, though softened by genuine warmth. "Indeed we have." The past year had been a whirlwind of diplomatic challenges and personal triumphs. Their relationship, once considered a punishment and disgrace, had become a powerful symbol of cross-species understanding. The small colony where they had first met had been transformed into a thriving diplomatic hub, with Dylan serving as security chief alongside his ambassador wife. Trouble, now a full-grown cat, sauntered into the room and leapt onto Dylan's shoulder, a trick he'd perfected over the years. The feline had adjusted admirably to their new life, becoming something of a mascot for the embassy. "Your meeting with the Federation representatives is in an hour," Dylan reminded her, crossing the room to straighten the collar of her formal jacket. "Try not to terrify them with your Azurian directness this time." "They called our relationship charmingly primitive," Nylira countered with an arched eyebrow. "They deserved every bit of my directness." Dylan laughed, pulling her close. "That's my girl." Defending human honor across the galaxy. Their kiss was interrupted by a soft chime from the adjacent room, a sound that still sent a thrill of wonder through them both. "He's awake," Nylira whispered, her eyes brightening. Together they moved to the nursery where their 6-month-old son was stirring in his crib. Tarek Dylan Baldwin, named in the Azurian tradition for Bridge Between Worlds, blinked up at his parents with eyes that shifted between human hazel and Azurian luminescent blue. His skin was a lighter shade of blue than his mother's, with subtle patterns that had begun forming shortly after birth. Patterns that Azurian scientists had declared impossible before his existence proved otherwise. "Good morning, little diplomat," Dylan murmured, lifting the baby into his arms. Tarek gurgled happily, reaching for his father's face with tiny fingers. Nylira watched them with wonder, still evident in her expression. "The medical team wants to run another developmental scan today," she said. "They're still trying to understand how he's possible." "Let them wonder," Dylan replied, bouncing their son gently. "Some things science can't fully explain." The pregnancy had shocked everyone, most of all Nylira and Dylan themselves. Azurians and humans had been considered genetically incompatible, their DNA structures too different for successful reproduction. Yet the life bond that had formed between them had somehow bridged that gap, creating something unprecedented. When the news had spread, reactions ranged from outrage to fascination. Conservative factions on both sides had called it unnatural, scientists had demanded endless tests, religious groups had declared it either miraculous or abominable. Through it all, Dylan and Nylira had stood firm, protecting their privacy and their growing family with equal determination. "The High Council is sending another delegation next week," Nylira said, taking Tarek from Dylan's arms and nuzzling his soft hair. "They claim it's a routine diplomatic visit, but we both know they're coming to see him." "Let them come," Dylan shrugged. "Maybe seeing him will change some minds." Tarek had indeed become something of a celebrity, the first human Azurian child in recorded history. His very existence challenged centuries of beliefs about separation between species and had sparked a revolution in interspecies relations across the galaxy. Ilaris says the educational reform bill passed, Nalaira mentioned as she prepared Tarek for the day. Azurian schools will now include accurate information about humans rather than the propaganda I was raised with. Progress, Dylan nodded approvingly. Slow but steady. Ilaris had remained with them, serving as both diplomatic aide and devoted godmother to Tarek. Her initial horror at Nalaira's relationship with a primitive had evolved into genuine respect for Dylan and fierce advocacy for human Azurian cooperation. Later that evening, after the day's diplomatic duties were complete, Dylan found Nalaira on their private balcony overlooking the colony. The settlement had grown exponentially since becoming an embassy, its once stark buildings now softened by gardens and architectural influences from a dozen worlds. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, joining her at the railing. "I was just remembering the day we met," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "How horrified I was to be sentenced to life with a naked human male." Dylan chuckled. "And now? Now I understand it wasn't a sentence at all." Her eyes met his, the patterns on her skin glowing with the intensity of her emotions. "It was salvation. For both of us," Dylan agreed, thinking of the lonely exile he'd been before she arrived on his doorstep. "Though I still maintain Trouble deserves most of the credit, if he hadn't meowed that morning." "That cat has entirely too much influence in this household," Nalaira said with mock severity. As if summoned, Trouble appeared on the balcony railing, followed by the sound of Tarek's happy babbling from the nursery monitor. "Our family call," Dylan said, taking her hand. Nalaira's expression softened as she gazed at their home. "From punishment to treasure," she mused. "The council never could have imagined this outcome." "That's the thing about us humans," Dylan replied with a wink. "We have a knack for turning the tables." "Indeed you do." Nalaira's fingers intertwined with his. "Your species' capacity for adaptation, for finding joy in unexpected places. It's remarkable." Says the woman who went from Azurian aristocrat to mother of a half-human child in under 2 years. Her laugh, once so rare, came easily now. "Perhaps I've become a bit human myself." "The best of both worlds," Dylan corrected, leading her inside to where their son waited. "Just like him." As they entered the nursery together, Tarek's patterns glowed in response to his parents' presence, a visible sign of the bond that connected them all. The little boy who shouldn't have been possible reached for them both, his existence a living testament to the power of connection across differences. Dylan looked at his family, his blue-skinned wife who had once been his punishment, their miraculous son, and even the troublemaking cat who had started it all, and felt a completeness he'd never imagined possible during his years of lonely exile. What had begun as the Azurian Council's idea of justice had transformed into the greatest gift either of them could have received. A love that transcended worlds, a family that defied biology, and a future that promised to bridge the gap between their peoples one small, blue-skinned miracle at a time. In the end, the punishment had become the treasure, not just for Dylan and Nalaira, but for humans and Azurians alike.